What's up, Jays Nation? We need to talk about some major updates that came out of the Blue Jays' recent press conference, and there's a lot to unpack here. We got news on Shane Bieber's health heading into spring training, some clarity on the Jose Barrios situation that's been hanging over this team, and what the starting rotation is going to look like moving forward. This isn't just offseason fluff. These are real decisions that will impact how competitive Toronto is next season, and we need to break down what all of this means for the club's championship hopes. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe if you're not already part of this community. We're covering every update, every decision, and every move this front office makes, and I need you locked in with us because this stuff matters. Let's get into it. Shane Bieber is going to be monitored throughout spring training, but the good news is it sounds like he'll be ready for opening day. That's huge for Toronto because when they acquired him before the trade deadline, they were betting on his ability to contribute in the postseason, not just the regular season. Bieber hadn't pitched since the very beginning of 2024 due to Tommy John surgery. So when he finally made his Blue Jays debut nearly a month after the trade, there were legitimate questions about how effective he could be. But he answered those questions pretty quickly. His first start against the Miami Marlins was impressive. 6 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned run. That's the kind of performance that reminded everyone why he won the Cy Young back in 2020. He finished the regular season with a 3.57 ERA and a 4.47 FIP over 40 innings. Not a massive sample size, but good enough to show he still had the stuff to compete at a high level. The real test came in the postseason, and that's where things got interesting. Bieber struggled in Game 3 of the ALDS against the Yankees, which wasn't ideal, but he bounced back with solid outings in the ALCS and had a strong start in the World Series. Of course, his World Series will forever be remembered for that solo home run he gave up in the 11th inning of Game 7. That's the pitch everyone remembers, and it's brutal because he was so close to helping Toronto win it all. But if you look at his overall postseason numbers, he posted a 3.86 ERA and a 4.26 FIP. Those are good numbers, especially considering he was coming back from major surgery and hadn't pitched meaningful innings in over a year. The fact that he was able to perform at that level in October shows he's still got ace-level talent when healthy. Now here's where things got really interesting this offseason. Everyone expected Bieber to opt out of his contract and test free agency. He's a former Cy Young winner. He proved he's healthy, and the market for starting pitching is always strong. But he shocked everyone by staying put, taking the additional year on his deal and locking in $16 million. That was a surprise, and it tells you something about how Bieber views his own value right now. Maybe he doesn't think the market would have paid him significantly more. Maybe he likes the situation in Toronto and wants to run it back with this team. Or maybe he's betting on himself to have a full healthy season and then hit free agency next year with even more leverage. Whatever the reason, the Blue Jays are thrilled to have him back. And if he's at full strength for an entire season, there's no reason he can't return to the form that made him one of the best pitchers in baseball when he was in Cleveland. Now, let's talk about Jose Barrios, because this is the part of the press conference that's getting the most attention. Toward the end of the season, Barrios was removed from the rotation and eventually placed on the injured list. Throughout the postseason, he wasn't around the team much, and he was completely absent during the World Series. That raised a lot of questions about what was going on behind the scenes, and Ross Atkins addressed it by saying Barrios wasn't happy about the situation. That's an understatement. If you're a starting pitcher who helped get your team to the playoffs and then you're suddenly not part of the postseason roster, of course you're not happy. But Atkins also made it clear that the Blue Jays plan to move forward with Barrios on the roster next season. That's important because there was speculation that they might try to trade him or cut ties entirely. So what does this mean for the rotation moving forward? If Barrios stays, Toronto is going to have 6 starters competing for spots. You've got Bieber, Kevin Gausman, Trey Yesavage, Dylan Cease, Cody Ponce, and Barrios. That's a lot of depth, and it gives the Blue Jays options. They can run a traditional 5-man rotation and keep 1 starter in reserve in case of injuries. They could experiment with a 6-man rotation to manage workloads and keep everyone fresh throughout the season. Or they could use that depth as trade bait and flip one of those arms for another position of need. Having too many quality starters is a good problem to have, and it puts Toronto in a strong position heading into next season. One interesting note from the press conference is that the Blue Jays plan to keep Luis Varland as a reliever. He finished last season with a 2.97 ERA and a 3.14 FIP, which are excellent numbers, and he set the record for the most postseason appearances by a pitcher. That's impressive, and it shows how valuable he was to the bullpen down the stretch. Keeping him in that role makes sense because he's proven he can handle high-leverage situations. And with the starting rotation already stacked, there's no reason to force him back into a starting role. He's more valuable to this team as a flexible reliever who can pitch multiple innings when needed. Let's circle back to Berríos for a second because his situation is complicated. He's owed significant money over the next few years, and his performance toward the end of last season wasn't great. That's why he was removed from the rotation in the first place. But he's still a talented pitcher who has had success in Toronto, and the front office clearly believes he can bounce back. The fact that he wasn't happy about being left off the postseason roster is understandable, but it also creates some tension that the team will need to manage. How does Berríos respond to that? Does he come into spring training motivated to prove he belongs in the rotation, or does the frustration linger and affect his performance? That's something to watch as we get closer to the start of the season. The other question is whether Toronto actually keeps all 6 of these starters or if they explore trade options. With Dylan Cease now in the mix on a massive contract, and with Bieber staying another year, the Blue Jays have a ton of starting pitching depth. That's valuable, but it also creates redundancy. If another team is desperate for starting pitching and is willing to offer an impact bat or bullpen arm in return, would the Blue Jays listen? I think they would. Having 6 starters is great insurance against injuries, but if you can turn that depth into a piece that addresses a bigger need, you have to at least consider it. Berríos, Ponce, or even Yesevej could be attractive trade chips if the right deal comes along. What stands out to me about all of this is how the Blue Jays are managing risk. They brought back Bieber on a reasonable deal. They're keeping Berríos despite the tension, and they're maintaining starting pitching depth while exploring ways to maximize the roster. That's smart front office work. They're not panicking, they're not making rash decisions, and they're giving themselves options heading into spring training. That's exactly what you want from a championship contending team. You don't have to have everything figured out in December. You just need to position yourself with enough flexibility to adapt as the season unfolds. The Shane Bieber news is encouraging because it sounds like he's going to be ready for opening day. If he can stay healthy for a full season and return to the form that made him a Cy Young winner, that's a massive boost for Toronto. Paired with Dylan Cease at the top of the rotation, with Gausman providing veteran stability, and with the other starters filling out the back end, the Blue Jays have one of the deepest rotations in baseball. That's a huge advantage, especially in a division as competitive as the AL East, where you're facing elite offenses every single night. The Jose Berríos situation is messier, but it's not unsolvable. The front office is committed to moving forward with him on the roster, and now it's up to Berríos to show he can still be an effective part of this rotation. If he can put the frustration behind him and refocus on his performance, he's still capable of being a solid mid-rotation starter. If the tension lingers or if his struggles continue, Toronto has enough depth to move on without him being a critical piece. Either way, they're covered. Jays Nation, that's the full breakdown of the Blue Jays press conference and what it means for the rotation heading into next season. Shane Bieber is on track to be ready. Jose Berríos is staying despite the drama. And Toronto has 6 starters competing for spots. That's a lot of depth, and it gives this team flexibility to manage injuries, explore trades, or experiment with different rotation structures. Stay locked in with us because we're covering every development as we get closer to spring training. Hit that like button, drop a subscribe, and let's keep building this community together. Thanks for being here. Let's go Blue Jays.